Today I'll be saying something about Letters of Light and Sound 1 by Harold Klemp, and the Excerpts CD. Other Excerpts CDs, except maybe the first, has 14, but this one only has 12, and that may be because it's longer. But it has a welcome and what's next letter. But this thing right here is that it's the word of God, or whether that means he's supposed to be a prophet, and that's how it is. I will start by saying something about the excerpts, and that something is in one of the talks. That if somebody was supposed to be the prophet of God, you would think that they could provide the spiritual guidance that people need, the spiritual exercise to open up the heart that people would need. If they're really the extreme level of knowingness incarnate that Eckankar members believe in, and the Eckankar program tries to program people into believing, then he would know what works for not only the individual, but for what works for everyone. Universal spiritual exercises. And as much as I've gone over some things before in my discourse series, my 45 response discourses, my neck ring's getting a bit too tight here. The Letters of Light and Sound are around Stranger by the River by Paul Twitchell. There may have been some changes. Chapter 3, The Light of God, is what Lesson 1 of Letters of Light and Sound is around. Chapter 7, The Philosophy of All, is what Lesson 4 is around. Chapter 12, The Law of Self, is what Lesson 5 is around. The Sermon in the Market Square is what Chapter 21 is what Lesson 9 is around. Lesson 3 is around Chapter 24, No Greater Love. Chapter 25, Death, is the subject of Lesson 7. Chapter 26, The Practice of the Zikar, is what Lesson 6 is around. Lesson 10 is around Chapter 27, The True Surrender. Chapter 30, The Master's Gaze, is the subject of Lesson 12. The Law of Life is what Lesson 2 is around. Jewels of Wisdom is what Lesson 11 is around. And The Riddle of God, Chapter 34, is what Lesson 8 is around. And another interesting thing from the excerpts for Letters of Light and Sound 1 CD is the fear is consistent, but not as consistent as me, which troubles some people that leave Eckankar. They think that Harold Klemp is lodged in their brainstem, attacking them, and trying to get revenge, or because they tell you, oh, once you've had the second initiation, he's always with you, even if you leave Eckankar. That freaks some people out, because on some level they still believe it. I never believed in the omnipresence, omnipotence, or omniscience of their master. I don't believe that he's with anybody in their inner life, especially, right there teaching with them. Oh, he's protecting them, and yeah, I don't believe that he's some constant inner guide with you. But if you give your permission for things to enter into your life, then something else may wander by and say, yes, this guy is worshiping something other than God, so I'm going to act like the angel that comes and visits or whatever. In chapter 1, we talk about worship. Now, Eckankar members will tell you, oh, we respect but do not worship. And then here they tell you, oh yes, this reverence and remembering the name, that's what we mean by worship. So, if you haven't figured it out by now, in the 4th year of Eckankar, in the first discourse, it becomes abundantly clear that this respect but not worship is worship. And some people say the soul is here. Some people say it's here. Some people say it's, here, or it goes in and out through there. I don't know if soul is limited, so that may be right there. The story of Adam and Eve being necessary in terms of, well, how else would they learn if they sinned? I don't think he gets the best point out of that, because Harold Klemp tells people that I would rather have you make mistakes and learn from it than to not act. Well, I think it's better to regret not having done something than to regret doing something. But it is possible that the whole Garden of Eden thing was not about the was not about a physical place in the first place. That's the overall points of the myth do gravitate towards that the importance is beyond the physical aspect of that we're referring to a pure state of consciousness, and we can't, and we go down into the worlds of duality, and where there's male and female and all this, but the idea that it gets, the more physical it gets, the less spiritual, I don't buy into this. And St. Paul was clearly on a different faith than Jesus, according to the Bible, so I don't think that all the paths were designated for God to do that. But there is a truth that all the actual prophets of God would have taught the same path. But evil is a choice that we would make. But some people would say, oh, well, the idea of sin is limited because it doesn't explain everything that happens in this world. Well, why should it? Why should the idea of sin determine everything that happens in this world? Now, this background that you hear is not Hugh, but and God. So instead of divine it's joined with God. And Eckankar teaches this idea of spiritual development. And this spiritual development can start with, just awareness that there's something unseen. And then there's worship, for health, wealth, progeny, fear, out of fear and hope. Then there's sort of a loving devotion, or okay, I hate this, so I'm going to get in line with that. Oh, well, actually, they don't make that point here. But and then there's responsibility for their whole life, and their role in it is their steps of spiritual development. Now, I'll be more detailed when I get into the 45 papers that I've written on the membership program of the Easy Way discourses, the Ecadream 1 discourses, and the Ecadream 2 discourses. But I'll ask you a question here, and you can answer it in the comments, or you can answer it to yourself and not tell me, or tell me privately. Do you think there is really a way to go beyond good and evil, to be united with light and sound? And there's also the idea in Eckankar that they believe that religion and science are not really what we're after here. We're after something, different. That religion and science are sort of at war, and they both cause problems, so Eckankar is something different. And science isn't just about excuses, but Eckankar does teach this idea of, well, we're not orthodoxy or orthopraxy, so the correct beliefs and the correct practices, that's not what we're really after. We're after experience. That would be contradicted later here. And being a co-worker with the Mahanta, the leader of Eckankar, the way shower or celebrity in other languages, would be clearing the way for the Ek teachings, not only for yourself, but for others. To always think about the leader of Eckankar, so it is really about the personality of Harold Klemp, or whoever is leading the group at the time, and serving the Ek. I'm sure this means the corporation, only out of love, not wanting credit about it. When you write in the organization, they change the names, whether it's needed or not, often with the stories, not only for liability issues, but so they never have to credit you. And people have in the past left Eckankar because, hey, that was my story, you gave me no credit. They don't want you to take credit for what you do in the group. The patience that no matter how much you develop, that you are going through the process of Eckankar, no matter how many initiations or outer recognition you get, you just keep doing it. So, thus underpinning some of the things that one may go over. The Friday fast, what day was it? Month, day, month. What happened? Recording about these things can be an important practice, and this is what's focused on in the workbook section of the Letters of Life and Sound 1. I would presume that maybe the Letters of Life and Sound 2, Take the Stranger by the River, chapters not included. Maybe, maybe not, but you can get the idea of how to write around a chapter of actual scripture, to think about that chapter, use it as a contemplation seed, reading before bed, or having scripture playing while you're sleeping. I plan to put some translation, some commentary of Quran, the whole thing, in a series of videos. This year I'll do one, and then in subsequent years I have at least another couple that I have the rights that I can do that with. And the whole idea of baptism as a control factor of the priesthood, and oh, the other initiations and stuff, they don't work. They're just control factors. They don't really do anything for you. But our thing, what we do in our group, that's, you know. And going down that hue off of the whirlpool, you have Hook, or Hoopa, Aluk, Hoon, Shanti, Sugamad, Baju, Aun, Mana, Kala, Alei. Yep, got it right. And my 305-6664. And it is important, the inner side of things like baptism over the outer side, but the physical practice of when you join a faith that you may have to take a full bath, as in Islam, or say something or do something that, you know, it does matter more what goes on inside you. And to ask who is in charge of your life, I don't see how it makes you in charge of. How do you become more in charge of your life if you only do other people's spiritual practices that are largely invented? I mean, any Golden Dawn member can probably come up, well, not every Golden Dawn member, but people who have studied the Golden Dawn system, as Harold Klemp had, could come up with a lot of these spiritual exercises. And he says you become in charge of your life by doing his spiritual exercises back every day. Or Paul Twitchell, he'll repeat some of Paul Twitchell's ones, or maybe somebody else's ones, to keep the Friday fast. Now, I like that idea of the Friday fast, that in terms of, you think about spiritual things all day, or you think about God. I don't like the idea of fantasizing about some cult leader all day long, but you have your choices. And the third one is to read Ek books and discourses, and these, I would agree that one should regularly read spiritual books. I try to read some Quran every day, and some of other books as well. But I've already told you that, you know, these so-called Ek worlds make their appearance in this book. I don't think any of the other workbooks have shown that. When you're on a path, you should really ask, why am I on that path? Did my expectations live up to what I thought the path was going to be? Am I better off? Some people would expect the dramatic things to happen, the visions and the massive skills and all that sort of stuff that comes with being a saint or whatever that you've heard of, but the power of the present is what we should be looking for to better serve God. And, that no one is looking but the Mahanta? No, let's be honest now. The Mahanta never looks at anything that he's not physically present for. A rather blasphemous thing happens on page 139, where he says, oh, the dignity of Jehovah. And those of you would recognize that, oh, he did this with the dignity of Jehovah. Monty Python, The Life of Brian is the one. I had a lovely dinner, and all I said was this piece of... my wife fixed a lovely dinner, and all I said was this piece of halibut was good enough for Jehovah. Oh, he said it again, blasphemy, The Bible doesn't actually say don't say God's name. It says don't use it in a secular context. But to compare people to God like that, or God is a noun and a verb. For some reason in Eckankar it's separated into sugmod. God is a noun, and ek, God is a verb. Okay, ek becomes a very confusing word. But he then again calls you to question God's power in terms of the whole resurrection thing, that over thousands of years things can end up in different bodies and they decay, and all the worms, and he just thought as a kid, not even, that's quite the feat for even the omnipresent, well, he didn't believe that about God, evidently. But you can tell here that if Yahweh is on level 2 in the pink, and he's way beyond, he goes back and forth between them all. That chart alone should give you the hint, but it's not direct enough. I do understand why it takes some people time to make their way out of the thing. But he ignores that idea of body, that minerals get eaten by the, go into the plants, and the plants go into the animals, and the animals go into the people, and so this idea of reincarnation in the Greek sense seems to come from that, and it actually predates the Hindu conception of reincarnation. So I'm surprised that he, instead of taking an argument for reincarnation, that he brings it out to question the power of God. Now, I would say that the intent of having spiritual experiences should not be to impress people, to strengthen their faith, to call them to question things, to invite them towards things. That should be what faith sharing is about, not I am better than you sort of thinking. But some people would write why they've left Eckankar. Now, Harold Klemp supposedly would know why far more people have left Eckankar than have ever been, than are currently a member. That's a lot of people. I'm talking, 80,000 people or so have left Eckankar over the years, and Eckankar seems to lose almost as many members as it gains. I think it may have lost numbers in recent years due to the internet, but it's constantly getting new members and losing members, but it's harder because of the internet for them to have as many members as they used to. But he wants to call you towards his power by having you think of how he is, every time there's a letter written, I give the time to think, why did they join, and what could have I done different? How could I have made the path of Eckankar more important in their eyes? And calling people to be a master of the physical plane. Well, how could you be situated on the astral, the causal, the mental, the etheric, one of the soul planes, actual realization or beyond, if certain things are not seen in your practice? People are right to look at the priest of an organization and say, what does this say about the organization? Now, you can't blame everything the congregation or the priest does on the book or the fundamentals of the path, but sometimes you can, when they're supposed to be the embodiment of the teachings, that everybody on this level embodies a certain amount of the teachings, then you can criticize the teachings. If you can say that if there's a leader that pretends to be absolutely perfect, yes, you can criticize the teachings. But people would look at flaws of the so-called Eckmaster and say that. Dividing your past and your present, and my past was the physical, now I'm on to the spiritual. I don't think it works like that for almost everybody who gets into Eckankar. But that's how people feel, that once they've been in Eckankar long enough, that they have been taught to feel that my past was not spiritual, and things outside of Eckankar aren't spiritual. And people outside of Eckankar really don't believe in that. And They want you to think that the greatest trick of Kal Naranjan there, or Jat Naranjan, the highest blameless, sounds like God, wants, his greatest trick is to trick you into thinking bad about the Master. And that's a huge warning sign for you, that even think that, oh, the devil's only against our group and he wants us, to focus about that. But Kal really does take the devil role in Eckankar. But Kal is not exactly a devil. He has his role in the Eckankar way of speaking. So it's de-demonizing the devil here. Laziness, drug use, cheating, controlling others, gossip, laziness, sexual misconduct, whatever, that's the things that Kal would invite towards. Yahweh does not invite towards that, thank you very much. And in Eckankar, they say that everything, good or bad, is deserved. Yes, that child who was molested, that's their fault because they did something bad in a past life. He had an accident, something bad in past life. Disease, genetic abnormality that's bad in your life, yeah, that's because you deserved it. I think some things are a test. You can believe otherwise, but I do believe that some things are a test in life, and it goes beyond merely you deserved it, so you're getting it, good or bad. I think God is more merciful than a zero-sum game. And creation as a plan, an action, and then being detached from results could have been the past, and now it is the plan, the action, and, well, I care little about the results. There's another myth here somewhere about the projection of the soul into the lower planes by casting an image, and then it goes down, sort of a 2D, then 3D sort of way of thinking. I don't remember exactly how it goes, but Harold Klemp is constantly coming up with the different myths. Well, not constantly, he is again and again came up with different myths of creation and stuff like this. This gesture here, in the last chapters, the Master Necessary, is probably the least creepy photo or image that you're going to see of Harold Klemp, or at least that I have seen. That, may the blessings be, Baraka Bashad. I'll agree with that. So it's a detached Master, the boatwork chalk town, which is the B of my XYB name. I will tell you that gesture. And then he goes into the love or power, and I don't think that things have to be polarized that way. Some people, oh, do you do it for love or do you do it for power? And then elsewhere he tells you, oh yes, in Eckankar we seek some sort of a spiritual power, but so in a way constantly going back and forth between that. And the silence about the inner experiences, well, some nightmares and stuff you don't want to tell people, but the silence about the Eckankar program is largely on a threat basis. And then after the last Dream 2 discourses, What's Next letter, we have the, oh, we're going to tell you the details. Oh, no, don't focus on the details. That's the trick of Kal. So I will review here in telling you that for Stranger by the River, Lesson 1 of the Letters of Life and Sound, it's Chapter 3, The Life of God. For Lesson 2, it's Chapter 31, The Law of God. For Lesson 3, it's Chapter 24, No Greater Love. For Lesson 4, it's chapter 7, the philosophy of all. For lesson 5, it's chapter 12, the law of self. For lesson 6, it's chapter 26, the practice of the zikar. You know, the name. For lesson 7, it's chapter 25, death. For lesson 8, it's chapter 34, the riddle of God. For lesson 9, it's chapter 21, the sermon on the market in the market square. For lesson 10, it's chapter 27, the true surrender. For lesson 11, it's chapter 33, jewels of wisdom. For lesson 12, it's chapter 30, the master's gaze. And I would invite you to think about God and the spiritual throughout your life, whether or not you want to be a member of such a group. And many people continue in the group without believing it much longer than I did. So, reminding you all to go Eck yourself.